Amanda Turner had spent the better part of her adult life giving everything to others. A devoted single mother and a compassionate nurse's assistant, she worked tirelessly at St. Luke's Hospital in a modest Midwestern town in the United States. For 5 long years, she had built a reputation for her kindness, patience, and unwavering commitment to her patients. Yet, despite her relentless work ethic, financial burdens loomed over her like a dark cloud. Every month, the weight of mounting bills and the fear of being unable to pay the rent for her small apartment and provide a stable home for her beloved 6-year-old son, Ethan, pressed heavily on her heart. On what seemed like an ordinary day, as Amanda finished her shift and carefully tucked away the remnants of another grueling workday, she received news that shattered her fragile sense of security. In the sterile, fluorescent-lit corridors of the hospital's changing room, after adjusting the last of her worn-out scrubs, she was handed a notice. A restructuring at the hospital had resulted in massive layoffs. Amanda's name was among those on the termination list. The announcement hit her like a freight train. In that moment, her years of devoted service and quiet perseverance felt utterly betrayed by a system that cared little for the human cost behind the statistics. With trembling hands, Amanda tried to process the news. She thought of Ethan, his bright eyes, his innocent laughter, and the dreams he held, however small, of a better future. How could she possibly support him now? The meager savings she had scraped together from long hours and relentless dedication were not enough to bridge the gap left by this sudden loss of income. As she walked home that evening, the world around her took on a grim hue. The familiar streets of her small town, usually imbued with a sense of belonging, now felt cold and indifferent, as if they too were echoing the emptiness that had settled within her soul. In the midst of this crushing despair, Amanda clung to a promise she had made to herself years ago. She would never allow hardship to break her spirit. Determined to find a way out of her dire financial situation, she began scouring job listings and classified ads that might offer even a glimmer of hope. Late one night, as she sat at her tiny kitchen table with a single, flickering lamp casting long shadows on the walls, she discovered an advertisement that seemed almost too good to be true. The ad read, "High-paying live-in caregiver needed for paralyzed millionaire. Dedication, confidentiality, and loyalty required. No prior experience necessary. Immediate start." Though the position sounded unusual and perhaps even demeaning to someone who had spent years caring for others, it also promised a salary that could cover her mounting expenses and perhaps even offer a pathway to stability. Amanda hesitated only briefly. The thought of losing everything weighed so heavily upon her that any opportunity, no matter how unconventional, had to be considered. In the quiet of that lonely night, as rain pattered softly against the window pane, she picked up the phone and dialed the number listed in the ad. Her heart pounded with a mixture of desperation and cautious hope. With little more than a whispered promise to herself that she would do whatever it took for Ethan's future, she accepted the offer. Little did she know, this decision would set in motion events that would forever alter the course of her life. A journey of unexpected encounters, deep emotional wounds, and the transformative power of compassion that would challenge her to rise above despair and discover strength in the most unanticipated places. The following morning, Amanda awoke with a heavy heart, yet resolved to face the day with the quiet determination that had carried her through countless trials. After a meager breakfast and a silent goodbye to the modest apartment that had sheltered her in recent turbulent times, she set out for the address provided in the job advertisement. The destination was a grand mansion on the outskirts of Chicago, a stark contrast to the humble life she had known. The mansion's towering iron gates and meticulously manicured lawns spoke of opulence and exclusivity, a world far removed from Amanda's daily struggles. As she approached the entrance, Amanda felt a twinge of trepidation mixed with a desperate hope. Dressed in her plainest attire and clutching a well-worn handbag, she took a deep breath and stepped forward. The doorman, impeccably dressed and courteous to a fault, glanced briefly at her modest appearance before ushering her inside. Once past the grand foyer adorned with sparkling chandeliers and polished marble floors, Amanda was led through a series of corridors by a discreet attendant to the reception area. There, she was informed that the next step was a formal interview with the employer. Moments later, Amanda found herself seated in a tastefully furnished waiting room, its soft lighting and understated elegance a sharp contrast to the financial hardships that weighed upon her. Her mind raced with doubts and questions. Who was this paralyzed millionaire who could afford such luxury? What did he truly expect from a caregiver? She clutched her resume tightly, trying to steady her nerves as the door opened and a stern-faced receptionist invited her in. In a richly appointed office overlooking a manicured garden, Amanda was introduced to Richard Dawson, the paralyzed millionaire whose life had been defined by both his immense wealth and a profound personal tragedy. Richard sat in a high-backed leather chair, his gaze direct and calculating, yet laced with a hint of weariness. His physical limitations were evident. He was confined to a wheelchair, but it was his demeanor that struck Amanda most. A man guarded by years of isolation and bitterness, yet still carrying the scars of deep-seated loss. The interview was terse. Richard's questions were pointed and clinical, probing her ability to manage the demanding, around-the-clock care he required. "Have you cared for someone with serious physical limitations before?" he inquired, his voice low and measured. Amanda answered truthfully, explaining her extensive experience in the hospital and her compassionate nature, though she could sense his skepticism. Richard's expression softened ever so slightly when she mentioned that her motivation stemmed from a personal understanding of hardship. She was not just seeking a paycheck, but a chance to make a tangible difference. After what seemed like an eternity of careful questioning, Richard informed her that the job was hers. His decision, delivered with a brisk nod and a curt handshake, carried with it an unspoken warning. This position demanded not only professional competence, but also emotional resilience and unwavering dedication. Amanda left the mansion that day with mixed emotions. The generous salary and promise of financial stability provided a glimmer of hope in her troubled life, yet the imposing atmosphere of the mansion and Richard's austere demeanor left her with lingering uncertainties. As she stepped out into the crisp morning air, she resolved to embrace the opportunity. If nothing else, it might be the lifeline she desperately needed to secure a future for herself and Ethan. In the days that followed, Amanda began her new role as a live-in caregiver for Richard Dawson at his sprawling mansion on the outskirts of Chicago. The mansion was a world of contradictions. Its exterior exuded grandeur and opulence, yet within its walls the air was heavy with an almost palpable loneliness. Richard's daily routine was rigorous and unyielding. He adhered to strict schedules, and his mood was as cold as the marble floors that lined the corridors. Despite his stern and often dismissive manner, Amanda observed subtle signs of vulnerability that occasionally surfaced behind his guarded eyes. Each morning, Amanda would prepare Richard's meals, assist him with daily hygiene, and ensure that his medications were administered on time. It was a demanding schedule that left her physically exhausted but emotionally engaged. Richard, in his wheelchair, would often scrutinize her work with a critical eye, his comments curt and laced with a bitterness that hinted at a lifetime of disappointment. Yet, in the quiet moments when he thought no one was watching, Amanda would catch glimpses of a softer side, a fleeting look, a nearly imperceptible sigh that spoke of a man burdened by solitude and regret. As the weeks progressed, the daily interactions between Amanda and Richard began to form the foundation of an unexpected connection. During the long hours of caregiving, Amanda would listen patiently as Richard occasionally allowed his thoughts to wander. He spoke haltingly about the loneliness of his world, of a time when he was not defined solely by his wealth and physical limitations. Amanda, drawing from her own experiences of loss and hardship, would offer gentle words of comfort and understanding, though always carefully maintaining a professional distance. One rainy afternoon, as thunder rumbled softly in the distance, Amanda was assisting Richard with his morning routine. In a rare moment of vulnerability, he hesitated before speaking. I have spent so many years surrounded by people who only see my fortune, my power, not who I really am." His voice was low, barely above a whisper, and for a moment the cold veneer that had long characterized him seemed to melt away. Amanda's heart ached with empathy as she replied quietly, "Sometimes, sir, the most genuine connections come from understanding the struggles we face. I too have had my share of hard days." Though Richard offered no immediate response, that conversation marked a turning point, a slow, tentative thaw in the icy barrier that separated him from the world. In the following days, Amanda began to notice small changes in Richard's behavior. He would sometimes ask her simple questions about her own life, her dreams, and the challenges she faced as a single mother. Though cautious, he appeared genuinely curious, a stark contrast to the detached millionaire he had been. These interactions, however fleeting, sparked in Amanda a sense of purpose that went beyond her professional obligations. She started to see that her role was not merely that of a caregiver, but that of a catalyst for emotional healing for both Richard and herself. Amidst the meticulous routines of the mansion, the human element began to shine through. The opulent surroundings, once symbols of untouchable wealth, now served as a backdrop to the unfolding drama of genuine connection. Every shared smile, every quiet word exchanged in hushed tones wove a fragile tapestry of trust and understanding between the two. For Amanda, each day became an opportunity to offer not just care, but kindness, an investment in a relationship that held the promise of transforming not only Richard's life, but also her own, and perhaps even the very soul of the mansion that had once epitomized isolation. As autumn deepened outside the mansion's towering windows, the evolving relationship between Amanda and Richard began to take on an emotional depth that neither had anticipated. The daily challenges of caregiving, combined with the strict, often unyielding regimen of Richard's life, gradually gave way to moments of unexpected tenderness. One crisp evening, after a particularly challenging day, filled with terse exchanges and lingering silences, Amanda was tidying up in the private study when she stumbled upon a faded photograph tucked between old documents in a neglected drawer. The image showed a young Richard standing beside a smiling woman and a small child, a snapshot of a life that seemed to belong to another era. For a moment, Amanda's heart tightened as she realized that behind Richard's stoic exterior lay a past marked by love and loss. That night, as the mansion settled into an eerie quiet, Richard called Amanda into his private quarters. Seated in a dimly lit room adorned with relics of a bygone era, he looked at her with an intensity that made her pulse quicken. "You have a rare gift," he began softly, his voice carrying a note of vulnerability that had long been absent. "I have lived in solitude for so long that I have forgotten what it feels like to be cared for, to be understood. I want to know, what is it that drives you, Amanda? What keeps you going when the weight of the world seems too heavy to bear?" Amanda, taken aback by his sudden openness, hesitated before replying, "I work because I have no choice. But sometimes I find strength in the hope that things might change. I want to believe that even in the darkest moments, there is a spark of light that can guide us forward." Richard listened intently, his eyes searching hers, as if trying to see beyond her professional mask. For the first time, he spoke of his own struggles, a confession of how his immense wealth had not shielded him from a deep, pervasive loneliness, and how the cold interactions of the elite had left him feeling invisible. "I have built an empire, yet I feel more alone than ever," he murmured, the words heavy with regret. Over the following weeks, the professional boundaries between caregiver and patient began to blur as shared confidences grew. Amanda learned that Richard's harsh demeanor was, in part, a shield against a world that had repeatedly disappointed him. In return, Richard discovered in Amanda a sincerity and resilience that rekindled his long-dormant hope. Their conversations, held in quiet corners of the mansion, by the window overlooking a modest garden, or in the silence of a dimly lit hallway, became a lifeline for both. With each exchange, the distance between them narrowed, and a fragile connection took root. Yet, amidst these tender moments, the demands of the job remained relentless. Amanda faced not only the physical challenges of caring for a paralyzed man, but also the emotional toll of bearing witness to his moments of despair. Her nights were often sleepless, filled with thoughts of her own struggles to provide for Ethan. But even on her hardest days, the memory of Richard's newfound vulnerability and the promise of genuine connection sustained her. In the grand, opulent setting of the mansion, what had once been a symbol of cold indifference now began to transform into a place where real human emotion could flourish. For Richard, every word spoken in honesty, every shared moment of silence with Amanda, chipped away at the walls he had built around his heart. And for Amanda, the realization that she could make a difference in his life and perhaps find a kindred spirit in the process sparked a courage she had long thought lost. In the final phase of their intertwined journey, the transformative power of their connection began to ripple through the mansion and beyond. As winter settled in, painting the world outside in hues of white and grey, Richard Dawson's condition, though still marked by physical limitations, started to reflect the emotional healing taking place within. His once impenetrable facade softened gradually, and the stern glint in his ice-blue eyes gave way to a warmth that had been hidden for far too long. This change was not abrupt or dramatic, but it was profound, a quiet acknowledgement that the isolation he had so carefully maintained was finally being replaced by the genuine affection he had found in Amanda. At the same time, Amanda Turner felt a renewed sense of purpose that transcended the immediate hardships of her life. The once daunting task of caregiving had become a calling, a way to mend not only Richard's wounded spirit, but also her own battered heart. Emboldened by her growing bond with Richard, she began to advocate for better working conditions within the mansion, addressing long-ignored issues among the staff and gently challenging the old, indifferent practices that had long plagued the establishment. Her efforts soon led to tangible improvements, fairer wages, more respectful treatment of employees, and a renewed culture of empathy throughout the hotel chain. Richard, witnessing these changes and the compassionate energy that Amanda brought into his world, gradually began to open up more. In moments of quiet reflection, he confessed fragments of his past, stories of a time when love had filled his life, when he had dared to hope and dream of happiness beyond the sterile confines of wealth. His recollections, laced with regret and longing, resonated deeply with Amanda. In her gentle reassurances, he found a kindred spirit. In her steadfast belief that every individual deserved to be treated with dignity, he rediscovered a part of himself he had long thought lost. One crisp evening, as snow fell softly outside the mansion's grand windows, Richard invited Amanda to join him in his private study. Surrounded by mementos of a bygone era and the fading photographs of his once happy family, he presented her with a carefully folded letter. "This is for you," he said, his voice trembling with emotion. The letter was a heartfelt confession, a declaration of gratitude for the warmth and hope she had rekindled in his life, and an acknowledgement of the profound impact she had made on him. In that moment, Amanda realized that what had begun as merely a job had evolved into something far more meaningful, a mutual redemption, a chance for both of them to heal the scars of their past and build a future based on authenticity, compassion, and genuine human connection. Over the ensuing weeks, the mansion and its surroundings became a living testament to this transformation. The once cold corridors now echoed with laughter, and the atmosphere was imbued with a sense of shared purpose. Richard, who had long been a symbol of unattainable wealth and isolation, now appeared as a man reborn through vulnerability and the healing power of love. Amanda, too, found herself reawakening to the possibility of personal fulfillment beyond the daily struggles of financial insecurity. Together, they forged a bond that transcended the conventional roles of caregiver and patient, evolving instead into a partnership grounded in mutual respect and heartfelt understanding. Their journey, marked by moments of pain, hope, and gradual transformation, ultimately revealed a timeless truth. True wealth lies not in material possessions or the veneer of power, but in the genuine connections we forge and the capacity to heal one another through empathy and love. In the quiet aftermath of their shared trials, as they stood side by side in a modest celebration of newfound hope, both Amanda and Richard understood that their lives had been irrevocably changed by the simple, profound act of caring. And in that realization, they discovered that even the most broken souls could be mended by the quiet, persistent power of love and compassion.